right. Feeding him 1,000 souls per day wasn't working. What's the point of keeping it up for the next 10,000 years? You just like made a bunch of kids with like the worst daddy issues ever. The Emperor, what does he actually do in 40k? Because here's the thing, right? We covered the trailer, we covered trailer, we've been covering everything so far, all the 40k stories, recent 40k stories once, and of course the biggest thing to come was the 11th edition trailer. 11th edition is already out, Armageddon box is already out. There was even the Femstone issues, but one of the biggest things right now, a lot of people, because that for half a frame in the trailer, the Emperor sort of just, looks, sort of nods its head towards the audience or something. And the thing is, me personally, I don't believe it. I honestly don't believe it in a sense that, how is this going to work? Alright? How is that going to happen? I've only seen a Titan once. I've seen a bunch of knights on the table, but I have never seen a Titan. I've only seen a Titan once on the table. What exactly is the Emperor going to look like if he returns? Right? Is he gonna be the size of a Titan? No. Is he gonna be the size of a knight? We don't know. Because for the past 30 years, no, it has been more than 30. For the past 40, roughly for the past 40 years since GW's inception in 1987, the Emperor has always been a concept. He has nothing but a concept. Just like, that's like in every religion, the mighty being is a concept. So question is, for this whole time, what exactly has he been doing? And I guess for tonight, we're here to find out with Arbiter Ian, the Emperor. What does he do in 40k? Well, because it was still the 30k when he gave his son's daddy issues. But now, what exactly does he do in 40k? Again, you guys, like it if you do, and subscribe. Emperor knows we need it.
Emperor of mankind, the corpse on the throne, golden...
See, him looking forward. This is it. This is the thing from the trailer.
Pants, the apparent ruler of the Imperium of mankind, is the source of a million theories, rumours and predictions. And if you're new to the world of 40k, it can be quite hard to sort out fact from fan theory. So in this video, I'm going to go through what we know about the Carrion Lord of the Imperium and what he actually does in the 40k galaxy.
Alright, so just a heads up, based on what we've covered, all he does is to basically protect the webway in a sense that he is the guiding light. He's some sort of a beacon or some sort of a what do you call that light in the ocean or something? Spotlight, sunlight. Anyways, that light in the ocean is a beacon to which all ships going through the warp navigates. I mean, supposedly that's a theory, or supposedly that's what he's supposed to be doing right now. But anyways.
Need more arbiting? Well, we've got a second channel. Check out Arbitor Ian's Precinct House for our book club and the Tale of Four Gamer series. So, if you're someone who's just got into Warhammer 40k, you're probably going to hear a lot about this guy, the God Emperor of mankind, about what his plans were, or are, or what he's doing right now, and when he's going to return, or wake up, or whatever other crazy theories people have.
Lighthouse! Thank you, Zara! The lighthouse! He is supposed to be serving as a lighthouse to humanity, or to whoever's, traveling through the warp.
Emperor is one of the biggest mysteries in the 40k world. Not so much a character as a plot device, really.
Yeah, see,
and the information we have about
concept.
what he is and what he does in the 41st millennium is spread across tons of little quotes in loads of different books, which is where...
Because apart from this, last time we heard from him was Space Marine 2. When he touched... what was the name of the protagonist in Space Marine 2? He said, son of Gilliman. Titus! When he called Titus son of Gilliman. That was it! That was it.
Where all the various weird theories come from. So I thought I'd just go through the lore we have and explain briefly what the Emperor does and how he works in the setting, and also how he got there. There are 4 important things to discuss here. First, his origins and his big plan to try and save humanity, as far as he saw it, during the Great Crusade. Then the events surrounding his battle with Horus during the Siege of Terra. Then what he seems to have become in the...
See, there's even this question. Was it Peter Tuber? No, it's not Peter Tuber. Who was it? The son that put him on the throne, where he shouted no and he misheard. Now, the leader of the Imperial Fist, what's his name again? I forgot.
The 10,000 years after that, what he is in 40k,
I don't know.
and finally what seems to be changing in the most recent timeline.
What?
Let's start with the Emperor's origins. I'll go through them quite quickly because I've done it in a lot more detail in other videos.
Let's keep on
But
going.
I'm putting it here mostly to lay the groundwork for the stuff that happens at the end of the Horus Heresy. The Emperor first arises to fame as a warlord on Terra in the Age of Strife, this long period that followed the collapse of all the great interstellar empires of humanity as the warp grew turbulent and interstellar travel became impossible. The Age of Strife lasted 5,000 years, but the Emperor was in fact far older. Born in around 8000 BC, possibly from a mass suicide of ancient shaman who sought to preserve their souls because the warp was becoming more turbulent, he was an incredibly powerful psyker, possibly the first powerful psyker, and that power was
We should actually get to this.
utterly anathema to the chaotic powers of the warp, which he saw as the greatest threat to humanity. At some point during that long existence, he discovered an ancient psychic amplifier hidden beneath the Himalayas, an alien device that would eventually become the Golden Throne. At another point, way later on, he journeyed...
I didn't know that. Because here's the thing, right? From almost every book, from almost every, every book, every audio book, and whatever, clips and snippets that, we've known, there has never been a vivid description, or there's never been a lucid description of Terra. Like, what does it look like? It's almost always a description of the Emperor's Palace, of the Golden Palace, but never beyond it. But never anything beyond it. So, yeah.
On a colony ship to the planet of Molech, where he entered the warp and came out even more powerful. The forces of chaos in the setting say that he did a deal with them, whereas the Imperials tend to phrase it as him stealing fire from the gods.
See, I've seen clips of those, but I've never actually read the materials of him dealing with the warp gods.
Eventually, the Emperor realizes that the Age of Strife, which was actually caused by the Eldar accidentally creating a new Chaos God, was about to come to an end, and that would allow galactic travel again, and it would put Chaos on the back foot for a bit, so he came up with a plan. In his opinion, if the warp storms come down and humanity isn't ready, it'll be destroyed by alien empires who are ready, or by unchecked psychic evolution. So he resolves first to conquer Earth, uniting all of its technology and knowledge, then to build a massive army of superhuman warriors, the Adeptus Astartes, led by even more superhuman generals, the Primarchs, who would go out and unify humanity across the galaxy. As part of that unity, he imposes the Imperial Truth, which outlaws religion, making it so that people don't fall to the worship of chaos so easily. And while this happens, he'll also enact the Webway project, which will allow humanity to use the ancient alien Webway for space travel instead of using unreliable, psychically intensive warp travel. Now, that's a risky plan, and the Emperor is...
The Imperial Truth literally backfired.
Not a god, he's just a very powerful psyker with a number of other superhumans helping him, and while he has some level of foresight, he can't really reliably predict the future. Him and his main advisor, Malkador the Sigillite, put in place loads of contingencies and what-ifs, aware that many of those will fail, but hoping that overall, their slim chance to save humanity would actually work. Now, whether the Emperor is justified or correct or not is a whole other question. I go through this whole section in way more detail in this video here, but broadly, the implication in most of Warhammer 40k is that if the Emperor didn't do this, humanity would have been picked off by alien empires and enslaved or destroyed or whatever. Warhammer's grim darkness often works by trapping you between a rock and a hard place, giving you only absurdly bad options to pick from. In this case, authoritarian genocidal warlord forces humanity into compliance, or everyone gets eaten by aliens are kind of your only choices. Anyway, this plan kind of works. His Great Crusade does conquer a lot of the galaxy, forcing unity on humanity, and it does that through his massive armies of superhuman warriors and also the Astronomicon, a giant psychic beacon he creates on Terra that's powered by astropaths but focused by the Emperor himself. This provides a pole star for his fleets and massively improves warp
There we go. The beacon, the lighthouse.
travel. He outlaws religion and spreads the imperial truth, wiping out any human empires that fell to the worship of chaos, and he even starts his Webway project, building the human entryways.
That was new, so chaos was already a thing in Terra. That, he believed he needed to destroy or outlaw. Interesting.
Webway through a portal in the Imperial dungeon underneath his giant palace in the Himalayas, and using the now massively improved Golden Throne.
See, I was talking about this, that and almost all of the books that I have encountered, there was never any real description of Terra apart from the Imperial Palace, apart from the Golden Palace, in which, he lives in.
To hold the connection steady, while an army of Custodes, Sisters of Silence, and Mechanicum personnel fight back the hordes of demons that are trying to stop them. Loads of his plan works, however loads goes wrong. The first thing is the scattering of the Primarchs by a former associate who decides his plan is monstrous. That not only slows down stuff like the Webway project from starting, because he has to go and lead the crusade himself until he finds all the Primarchs, but it also means that all the Primarchs grow up in different cultures, and many of them, when they are finally found, harbour various resentments of the Emperor. Again, I cover that in a slightly more tongue-in-cheek video here.
See, again,
also,
we
despite
covered it before. So apart from making daddy issues, what else?
his attempt to unhook humanity from the opiate of religion, people start to worship the Emperor in secret, which is something that he really doesn't want, but it's so widespread he can't really completely ever stand.
In the book, Horus Rising, there was only the beginning, the snippets of it. I forgot the name of that pilot, I guess, when he started, reading from the Imperial Truth. He was reading and he treated the way Dan Abnett presented it. It felt like that particular pilot was reading off of a Bible or reading from a Bible, which was a stroke of literary genius, if I'm not mistaken.
Out. And of course, eventually the resentment of the Primarchs, particularly Horus, leaves them exposed to manipulation by chaos, which will eventually bloom into the Horus Heresy, a massive civil war. And just before that starts, in an attempt to warn the Emperor about that, but also to prove how great sorcery is, the Primarch Magnus the Red psychically blasts his way directly into the Imperial dungeon, accidentally destroying much of the machinery that was holding the Webway project together. This leaves the Emperor in a terrible position going into the Horus Heresy. He's by far the most powerful combatant the Imperium has, but he's now tied to the Golden Throne, attempting to hold that connection to the Webway open. For the first 5 years of the heresy, his psychic might is spent trying to hold the Webway.
I mean, who else was better for the job? He needed to hold it together. His sons was out there. Horus was still War Master. So yeah, that was he right? Because he foisted everything on Horus. Horus wasn't the best, but he was definitely the first. Horus was the favored son. Horus Lupercal. So the thing is, you know what? I'm gonna hold out. I'm gonna keep. I'm gonna make sure that the light stays on at home while you go off, and increase our you go off and increase our home. Was he right? He definitely made a lot of wrong moves. I mean, with all of his sons acting under this a ton of daddy issues.
Way project together, but when Horus commits forces to the Webway on the other side of the war, traitor legions and titans supporting the demons, it becomes very clear that they have to abandon the whole thing. In order to rescue his armies that are still fighting in there, the Sisters of Silence enact the ultimate sanction. They plug 1,000 psychers into caskets attached to the Golden Throne, sucking out their psychic energy and providing the Emperor with enough of a boost that he can briefly manifest in the Webway and buy enough time for his armies to fall back before they shut down the whole project. That's the first
and now it's a daily thing.
Time they try and plug a load of psychers into the Golden Throne, and it didn't entirely work either. They tried to kill it, flash frying the awakening machinery and breaking the power sources to terminate the opening for good, only for the doorway to remain partially open.
Go.
It wouldn't close. The things on the other side refused to let the wound heal. Now the Emperor held it sealed through force of will. It existed in a state of perpetual low power, a huge grey eye that sighed white mist into the throne room in a ceaseless exhale.
See, here's what I was talking about. If you could you were talking about something quite vague here, but Dan Abnett and Aaron here did their best, which is great. But the thing is, I believe that fantasy has a better material to work with, in a sense that you can only describe fiction in a sense that this is it, right? This is it. But the thing is, if you describe a zombie, you can describe a zombie. And most people actually do. But here, the awakening machinery breaking the power, it refused to let the wound heal. What refused? The huge grey eye that sighed white mist into the throne room in a ceaseless exhale. What exactly is that supposed to mean? Anyways.
So, despite the Webway project being abandoned, the Emperor is still forced to stay on the Golden Throne, holding closed the final part of the portal, lest a warp rift open and Terra be swarmed with demons. This is where we start to see the role the Emperor is going to play in the coming years. For the rest of the heresy, even up to the Siege of Terra, the Emperor is confined to the throne. Yep. Nobody else on the loyalist side is powerful enough to hold the breach closed for more than a few hours, so it has to be him. But using the technology of the throne and his own vast psychic might, he tries to help out in other ways. Through a lot of the war, he's locked in a form of remote psychic combat with Horus, who himself had done a deal with the gods and become a lot more powerful. In the books, this is told allegorically, sometimes through an extended chess match. This takes a lot of...
the way he's describing it, the way our Arbiter is describing it, again, very vague, in a sense that, this mental chess match happening between Horus and the Emperor, because this was all written down in a sense that it can only be described in that sense or in that way. So, yeah, again, there are limitations to something like this.
Concentration by the time of the Siege of Terra with Horus.
In terms of writing material like this.
Horus at the gate, he's doing 1,000 things at once. He stokes the wards that guard the last of the palace. That's the psychic wards that keep demons from getting in. He radiates controlled bursts of telesthesic energy that weaken and shrivel the Neverborn, instantiating closest to our fastness. He watches and moderates the flow of the End War, both at macro and micro levels. He moves through the minds of individual warriors as they crunch and gasp and stab, observing the flow of combat at a granular level. And simultaneously, he watches from above, like one of poor Jagatai's finest hawks, hovering on an updraft, beholding below him entire regiments and armies as they twist and pivot and brawl. He shaves and shapes the etheric turmoil of the Webway, guiding and conducting immaterial force via the throne's ancient machineries so that the doomsday pressure can be held at bay. That's the pressure on the warp portal from the other side. And he tries, as best he can, to soothe the minds of 1 billion terrified human souls as they flee and panic and scramble for some vestige of safety. Eventually, with Horus's forces at the gates and reality collapsing into the warp, he gets up to fight him, leaving Malcador to mind the throne as long as he can. Malcador knows it's a death sentence. In fact,
there we go, another mistake.
The quote from above was Malcador going, "Oh God, I'll do my best." At first, the Emperor attempts to draw in all the power he can from the warp, but it's revealed that that is actually a trap. If he becomes too powerful, he'll turn into this thing called the Dark King, something so inhuman that the universe will be destroyed. So instead, he puts aside much of that power and he goes to fight Horus. And before he does that, he takes a piece of himself and he sets it adrift in the warp. My lord and friend has broken off a part of his soul. He's amputated that portion of himself that contains almost all of his hope, loyalty, and compassion. For such things will become a hindrance when he faces the Lupercal. If he's obliged to kill his son, then those qualities would afterwards inevitably drive him into self-hatred and regret and condemn him to the same embittered path as Horus. He's set those frail and cardinal virtues adrift on the tides of the Empyrean so that they will not immobilize him. And in the hope that one day he'll be able to reclaim them and be whole again. all his hope, his mercy, his grace, his love, cast into the lightless tracks of space and time. That fragile asterism will, as cosmic ages turn, slowly grow by a coalescence of emotion and belief, just as the powers of chaos grow. It luminesces briefly, just a speck of hermetic fire against the shrouded pinpricks of the Milky Way, like an infant sun or a child's star, and then it's gone.
See, again, written by Dan Abnett. As poetic as this whole thing sounds, there's only so much that old Dan here and Aaron can do.
Lost from view. So he sets aside...
How exactly are we supposed to take this?
All of his good virtues so he can be horrible and merciless enough to both actually fight his favourite son and mercilessly rebuild the Imperium again after.
Was Horus the favorite, or was he favored? In Horus Rising, he said, Father, he had the same line as Jesus Christ. Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? In essence, why was the burden given to me? Because was Horus the best? Was Horus the favored one? Was he? We don't know, but we all know there is this trend. I'm pretty sure you guys have. We give that the firstborn is the parent's favorite employee. So yeah, if you guys are the firstborn in your family, you could definitely tell that you're your parents' favorite employee. Like, that meme. You are now one of my elite employees. So was Horus favored? Was he the favorite? Was he the greatest? I don't think so. I think he was simply the favorite employee, being that he was the first one. And I like this one, by the way.
Afterwards. Sounds productive. He then goes and fights Horus, and they have a colossal battle through every sort of reality, depicted as a physical fight, but also a metaphysical card game, but also every other sort of contest that could exist. And it's difficult.
Sanguinus is overrated, bite me.
And he almost loses multiple times, but he eventually wins. He's helped in this by a number of people distracting Horus, but also by a fortuitous event that gives us some clues into how this galaxy works. During the siege, on the other side of the giant Imperial Palace complex, the Astronomicon, the navigational beacon that would have been really handy for getting, Imperial reinforcements to Terra, say, had gone down. Led by a prophet named Euphrates Keeler, a delegation of refugees, all people who believe that the Emperor is a god, managed...
Euphrates Keeler, I think she was in Horus Rising.
To get into the Astronomicon and reignite it through the power of faith and also of desperation. And this renewed psychic energy gives the Emperor a boost. There is a light inside him, a light behind his eyes, the pure white light of a species that, in its madness, believes in him beyond all reason and trusts...
It's amazing, right? Like, Dan Abnett writes the first and the last in the series.
In him beyond all logic, a species that imagines him to be its shield and protector and has such faith in that act of imagination, it's made real. He looks like a god. It's where his power comes from. We are one and the same, the Whispers say. Mankind and the Emperor the Emperor and mankind, souls bound together. And that psychic energy of a mass of panicked humanity all desperately believing in him not only lights the Astronomicon again, so reinforcements can get there, but also allows him to kill Horus. As a little aside, that is actually a weird, slow change in the lore. Before, we knew that warp entities, demons, chaos powers...
And was that supposed to be a retcon or something? Good old Dan.
Etc. were made from emotional energy. That's how the warp was always phrased. But it was unconfirmed if actual worship did anything. Is praying to the Emperor actually helping? Or is it just what your brutal imperial overlords tell you to do to shut you up and keep you in your place?
Yeah.
What these quotes seem to confirm is that belief and emotion in 40k could be kind of swapped out for each other, and both of them work a bit like Pratchett's Discworld or American Gods. If enough people really, really believe in something, that creates some sort of warp effect. Anyway, by this point, we now have most of the building blocks that explain how the Emperor in 40k works, barring one massive bit of the story.
I mean, philosophically speaking, religion is a social construct. It's like something created and built by humanity, if you think about it.
which is putting him back on his chair. After the battle, Horus is dead, but the Emperor is mortally wounded too. There's scarcely a trace of life. No heartbeat he can feel, no rise and fall of the lungs. One of his father's eyes is closed, the other gone entirely. His skin is cold and pale, and his hair is matted with blood. The injuries he's sustained to his arm, his body, and his head are catastrophic. Dawn cranes in and listens. There's just a trace of breath, a wheezing, laboured rattle of air in his throat. Dawn knows that sound. He's heard it too many times. He's heard it in men and Astartes alike. The fact that his father is a demigod giant with a demigod giant's biology doesn't matter. It's the sound of mortality. It's the soft footsteps of death as it approaches. Responding to a sign from Malcador, who is...
So the word was, or at least how the story goes, is that the Emperor, he was going to put him back on the chair. That was Malcador. Malcador, no, not the Sigilite. Dorn was supposed to was basically on the throne room, and the thing is, he wasn't supposed to. The Emperor shouted no, but apparently Dorn heard wrong and misheard his dad and said and heard now from no now or something. So
is currently being burned up in the Golden Throne. Dawn and Malcador bring him back to the throne room and sit him back on his throne. When they do this originally, they think that the throne is going to heal him, but that isn't really what happens.
There we go.
As Malcador says, yes, the throne may stabilize him and suspend him, as it did me, but that's beside the point. He's the only one who can stabilize it, for I can no longer perform that task. And thus, it will tether him here, to this seat, to this room, to this reality, on the brink of death and the verge of life, both wounded and whole, unborn and yet reborn, ended yet unending, now and forever. It was never his intended plan, but it was a contingency. That's what he told me anyway. He had me believe he would be ready if there was no other choice.
The thing is, that was something Malcador and the Emperor came up with together.
I've tasted but a brief...
But the thing is, it was a contingency in the Emperor, that that little snippet, that little clip of him shouting no and now and Dorn being confused. It was a contingency. A contingency is something that, you come up with if everything has gone wrong. And yeah, definitely everything went wrong. He wasn't expecting that, Horus would turn heretic or something.
Moment of that eternity, and that is more than enough. May your death live forever, my friend. There is nothing immortal about this.
And thus was born the Carrion Lord.
So the Emperor, broken, is returned to the throne, which partly keeps him alive, but partly keeps him permanently on the cusp of death, because he's the only one who can use it. Now, with Malcador dead, and the Emperor at that point unable to communicate, the remaining loyalists think this is only temporary. He's just going to be on the throne until it heals him, and in order to keep that process going, they enact the ultimate sanction again. 1,000 psychers are plugged into the throne. Their souls are drained to feed and help the Emperor. And then another 1,000 and another, and eventually it dawns on them that this is never going to stop. He's not going to heal. He's locked to the throne forever. And
so why keep doing it? Why feed? What? How did they come up with here's the thing, right? From 30 to 40k, 1,000 souls per day. So how did they come up alright, feeding him 1,000 souls per day wasn't working. What's the point of keeping it up for the next 10,000 years?
This process becomes the norm, tradition and ritual. 1,000 psychers a day to sustain the Emperor.
There we go.
So that's the history lesson, and by the end of this, we've got all the building blocks to explain what the Emperor becomes in the next 10,000 years.
Finally!
For 10 millennia after this, the Emperor remains there, and according to pretty much every account, the Emperor...
Why keep it up for the next 10,000 years?
Emperor has neither moved nor spoken since being interred within the Golden Throne. That's from the most recent edition's introduction to the setting, though we have to assume that they mean spoken physically, because he's definitely communicated with people since then. Though his body was broken, the master of mankind survived by the immeasurable force of his supreme psychic will. The stasis fields and psi-fusion reactors of the machine known as the throne sustain what remains of his withered form. His great mind is preserved within his rotting carcass, kept alive captive by ancient and unfathomable technologies. From this guilt prison, the Emperor's immense psychic powers reach out from the Golden Throne, enveloping and shielding humanity from a galaxy of enemies. The dying embers of his power are a beacon of light in an endless ocean of malevolence. So, the Emperor of 40k is physically a shriveled corpse on the throne, but
remember, he threw that part of his soul with humanity with mercy into the webway in order to fight Horus. So, what exactly is left here on the throne?
psychically still active. That spark of psychic ability sustained by the Golden Throne itself and the 1,000 psychers rounded up across the Imperium by the Black Ships and fed into it daily, protecting the Imperium as well he can, just like he did on a much smaller scale back in the Siege of Terra. From this position, he does a few different things. First, the Emperor is, just like the frontispiece of all the book says, the master of mankind by the will of the gods and the master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies.
Which gods?
The Emperor, according to Imperial doctrine, rules the Imperium. However, since he doesn't actually speak or make any rulings, and since going into the throne room is not only barred by the Custodes, but also so incredibly dangerous most mortals would die trying, the actual running of the Imperium is taken over by people like the High Lords of Terra. This is rationalized as, well, for a High Lord to have reached such a position, surely that must be the will of the Emperor, which is extremely convenient if you're a High Lord. Anyway, while the role is probably ceremonial by this point, technically...
I mean, the same thing, that's the same thing, as provided under, historical settings, where you have, where royalty invoked the mandate of the Lord or mandate of God that they were provided here under mandate of heaven to rule. So, same thing.
The Emperor rules his Imperium. That's his first job. Next, he's still holding that warp portal shut underneath Terra. If he were to leave the throne without someone else taking over, and there kind of isn't anyone else, then the warp rift is ripped open by demons and they flood Terra from underneath. Conveniently, the Grey Knights, the Imperium's premier demon hunters, have a secret order, the Terminus Decree, that says that if he ever gets up off that throne, they have to return him to the throne, which might not be...
See, who built that Terminus order? Like, and whatever happened to that retcon? Like, it's gonna be the Grey Knights versus the Custodes. Like, what's gonna happen there?
Be the whole truth. It never is in 40k, but still, it makes sense, right? The Emperor holds shut the warp portal under Terra, but most people don't know that there is a warp portal under Terra, so it's not the most famous thing he does. What's much more widely known is that he focuses and directs the Astronomicon. The Astronomicon is based in the Hollow Mountain on the other side of the vast Imperial Palace complex, connected by massive psionic transmission conduits. The exact relationship between the two pieces of technology, the Astronomicon and the throne, isn't completely clear, but the general idea is that the Emperor doesn't power the Astronomicon. It has its own choir of astropaths who sing it into existence, also slowly dying and having to be constantly replaced as they wither away. But the Emperor's psychic might keeps it lit and guides it and sort of defines it. He also soul binds psychers, which turns them into astropaths. The black ships of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica patrol the Imperium, rounding up any rogue and latent psychers, and while, many of those are fed to the Golden Throne, the stronger ones, those who could be useful to the Imperium, might find service as astropaths, acting as an interstellar communication system for humanity. To enhance these abilities, they go through a ritual in which their mind is psychically reshaped by the might of the Emperor, which protects them to some degree from the predations of the warp and amplifies their telepathic abilities. The process is extremely painful and usually results in the burning out of optic nerves, which leaves most astropaths blind. And lastly, and this is the thing that will take ages,
I've always wondered why astropaths did it or navigators did that. Like, because here's the thing, right? The thing about Grimdark, I never knew that, right? That, them basically, their optic nerves being destroyed because of the ritual or because of the process. I've always thought that, them blinding themselves was simply part of the ritual of them becoming astropaths. Because, just like in, French Crusade, Trench Crusade, you've got sniper priests, and what they do is they blind themselves on purpose under the ritual in order to become sniper priests, because they shoot by faith, not by sight, and to do that, the sacrifice requires for them to literally gouge out their own face. So I always thought these astropaths was provided. I always thought that they did it under a ritual and not just some sort of whatchamacallit, and not some sort of part of the process. Like if you play football too much, your heels would be destroyed or something.
Just to explain, the Emperor protects. The Emperor intercedes across the Imperium wherever he can, credited with miracles that protect Imperial armies and with communicating his will through systems such as the Emperor's Tarot, or by visions experienced by the faithful, and by occasionally directly possessing his servants or granting them some measure of his own power. However, this is kind of difficult to quantify, because while we know the Emperor does do all those things, how much he does them.
Again, he is a myth, he is a concept. That's why, regardless of the 11th edition of him literally just looking out or turning his head, he at this particular point in time, after 40 years of GW pushing this crack on us, he's a concept.
Is made confusing by the religion that sprang up around him. With the Emperor no longer directly around to forbid it, over those 10,000 years, the illegal religion that worshipped him back in the Crusade grew until it was the state religion of the Imperium, taught as fact and ruthlessly enforced on the people of the galaxy. As part of that, his emaciated appearance on the throne became valorized, a symbol, the graven image of the immortal emperor, a skull-faced warlock on a mighty throne, eternally alive on the edge of death, imposing in his majesty. The citizens of the Imperium are taught that the emperor is an omniscient, omnipresent god who watches over them and keeps them all safe, who they owe their fealty and their faith. They should worship him regularly in whatever local way they want to do that. Now, we know that the psychic energy of the faithful powered up the Emperor during his final battle with Horus, so presumably all that belief energy is pretty useful to the Emperor. Maybe the fervent prayers of millions of humans over 10,000 years have helped him change from a really psychic guy on a chair to an actual bona fide warp god. Ilian Nastase and Eldar Farseer suggests as much to Guilliman in Godblight. Did I not say there are gods who were once mortals? These beings become focal points for belief, and belief begets faith, and faith hangs from them, changes them, and elevates them, if that's the correct word. Again, we're entering a massive tangent here. I've done a video on
I've actually never read any of Guy Haley's work, but anyways.
This, but the exact definition of what counts as a god in 40k is really, really vague. Nastase here basically says that
what constitutes a god is really, really vague, because it's a concept. The Emperor has been, ever since the Emperor is worshipped as a god, he became a concept. Do we walk him around the table like a titan, like a knight? Or are we going to see an oversized Astartes the size of a knight? Is that what he's going to be?
Thing powerful enough counts, but that also means that Guilliman himself could be one, which isn't particularly helpful. But just how much power you need, where is the line where you get to call yourself a god, isn't really relevant to the conversation.
Yes, it is.
The Emperor is definitely a really powerful being with a massive warp presence, and we can assume that the psychic energy of humanity has helped that out a lot. But also, the Church has a tendency to overstate everything, so we can never really be sure what is being done by the Emperor and what isn't. And a lot of those miracles have other ways of being plausibly deniable. We know the Emperor intercedes directly sometimes, granting power to his servants in times of need. One great example of that is living saints, people resurrected again and again and who exhibit genuinely miraculous powers that they certainly believe to be gifted by the Emperor. Both Saint Celestine and Saint Sabbat say as much. But also, there are people in World who are skeptical of that. Inquisitor Greyfax initially believes Celestine to be some sort of horrible warp entity masquerading as a saint, and Commissar Gaunt is initially very skeptical when the Isholi girl Sanyan starts to say she is the reincarnation of Saint Sabbat, at least until she starts doing loads of magic. On a similar note to that, Gilliman, when he's infected by Nurgle's god blight and about to die, is possessed by what seems to be the spirit of the Emperor. Something huge and dangerous moving through the warp. Something he had not felt for a long time. And similar to both of those, we have vague references occasionally to the Legion of the Damned, a bunch of spectral space marines that appear to
See, again, vague references. Because he is a concept.
Save Imperial soldiers faced with certain defeat, even though we also have lore that suggests the Legion of the Damned are something else. In Godblight, the Nurgle demon Kugath refers to all these things in the same breath. A Primarch walks the stars for a century, and the saints of the Anathema and his unliving legion are abroad. On the other hand, the church goes around sainting other people who seem to have very little in the way of any magic powers. There's a whole Inquisition faction named the Thorians who travel around trying to find examples of the Emperor acting through individuals and then declaring them either true miracles or false.
Yeah.
The Thorians are named for the famous preacher Sebastian Thor, who reunited the Imperium by casting down the apostate Cardinal Gouge Vandire in the 36th millennium. Thorians believe the Emperor moved through Sebastian Thor, though we have no evidence of Sebastian Thor having the sort of powers someone like Celestine has. We know that the Emperor protects by making miracles happen, but again, it's the ecclesiarchy who get to judge what is and isn't a miracles. In the books, we sometimes see unexplained phenomenon that can't really be anything other than the Emperor helping. Ibram Gorn and his adjutant once experienced meeting...
I mean, the last one, or the last thing we saw was when Titus was blessed. Literally on the forehead by the Emperor, son of Gilliman. That was it.
Ancient servant of the Saint Sabbat in a remote chapel in the woods who helped them in times of need, giving them respite and transport and advice for the future, though when they went back later, there was nothing there, and it turned out the servant had died centuries ago. Surely a miracle sent by the Emperor. On the other hand, when Vandire sent fleets of ships to intercept Sebastian Thor, they were swallowed up by a warp storm that mysteriously happened, which was declared to be a miracle sent by the Emperor and named the Storm of the Emperor's Wrath forevermore. But was that the Emperor, or was it just a lucky warp storm? The great faith of the Sisters of Battle...
Historically speaking, the Kamikaze, the Lord, during the Mongol invasion of Japan, Mongols came in on ships. First one, storm blew the fleet away. Second time, blew it away again. And third time, it blew it away again. By the third, the Japanese have accepted that there are powerful gods looking after us. Kami, God, Kaze, basically storm.
Allows them to perform minor miracles. They believe that this is the Emperor looking down on them, hearing their prayers and doing magic, basically. But on the other hand, the Custodes question where those powers come from. You have fought with the Sisters of Battle. You have seen how their belief protects and enhances them. A psychic effect that they would in any other denounce as witchcraft. To the Custodes, the miracles the sisters do are just strong belief having an effect on the warp, just like psychers. And of course, the Emperor sends messages to his servants, which they experience as dreams and visions, which obviously leaves a lot of leeway for people who just...
If you guys saw something like this, like on the street, would you believe that this guy is carrying a message from God?
Have visions to think they're being talked to by the Emperor. On a much smaller scale, many in the Imperium believe that reading the psychically impregnated Emperor's Tarot allows them to divine what the Emperor wants them to do, and maybe sometimes it does, but there's no evidence that it always does. In 40k, the Emperor does protect. He definitely casts his mind out across the galaxy, attempting to be in 1,000 places at once, just like in the Siege, causing miracles and psychic phenomena. But also, the religion that's grown up around those miracles now attributes everything good to their omnipotent God Emperor, vastly overestimating what he's actually doing. And the church can be just as corrupt and hypocritical as any human institution, so frequently anything that benefits the church is assumed to be the will of the Emperor. So that's what he does, but 10,000 years of doing that has not been particularly kind to the psyche of the Emperor. We have two accounts of people actually...
Stuff gets muddled.
Going into the throne room, meeting the Emperor, and surviving, and both are very similar. In the 41st millennium, the Emperor is depicted as a vengeful entity composed of 1,000 different voices, all struggling to hold themselves together. Were we not compelled to expel compassion or love or joy? Those went away. How else could we have armored ourselves? Existence is torment, a torment that must nourish us. Evidently, we must strive to be the fierce redeemer of man, yet what will redeem us? Hear this. Only tiny portions of us can heed you, otherwise we neglect our Imperium, of which our scrutiny must not falter for an instant. How else shall we soulbind psychers and overview the warp and beam the Astronomicon beacon and survive and receive information and grant audiences all at once, unless we are many? That's from the Inquisition War, which comes with a warning nowadays that not everything within it is strictly accurate, but it doesn't say which bits. But it is very, very similar to what Guilliman experiences when he meets the Emperor in Dark Imperium. Too much, too bright, too powerful. The unreality of the being before him stunned him to the core. 100 different impressions, all false, all true, raced through his mind. And then that thing, that terrible, awful thing upon the throne saw him. My son, it said. 13, it said. Lord of Ultramar, savior, hope, failure, disappointment, liar, thief, betrayer, Guilliman. He heard all these at once. He didn't hear them at all. The Emperor spoke and did not speak. Robute Guilliman, the raging tempest, spoke his name, and it was as the violence a dying sun rains upon its worlds. Guilliman, Guilliman, Guilliman. The sensation of many minds reached out to Guilliman, violating his senses as they tried to commune, but then one mind seemed to come from the many, a raw, unbounded power, and gave wordless commands to go out and save what they've built together, to destroy what they've made, to save his brothers, to kill them. Contradictory impulses, all impossible to disobey, all the same, all different.
Again, a concept. A concept. What else could he be other than a concept?
The Emperor, the psychic entity still capable of communication with mortals, is described in both of these as a thing, a force, a hurricane of different conflicting voices, a mind pulled apart by 10,000 years of trying to be everywhere at once, possibly pulled back into its constituent parts. Remember, one origin story for the Emperor is that he's loads of psychers all combining their warp essences. Crucially, he's also described in both of these as being a merciless, compassionless being. Remember, he threw all that away.
There we go.
That
when he fought
thing
Taurus.
is what the Emperor has become by 40k, 1,000 desperate voices chained to a corpse on a chair, which might also explain how horrific the Imperium that's formed in his
I mean, that's the whole point, right? In a sense that, it's a birth of a religion. Like, nothing, I mean, if you believe a lie, if you repeat a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. Philosophically speaking, same with religion. So, like, in every, what was, you give it power the moment you believe in it. One of the most repeated interview questions, job interview questions that I've ever heard or I've ever encountered is if a tree falls in the forest, did it actually fall or something? Like, and the best answer is that nope, there is no forest, there is no tree. Because it is mankind that provides the forest meaning, it is mankind that provides the tree its existence. So if there is no one to hear it, there is no forest, there is no tree. Interesting.
His name is. So, we know what the Emperor becomes over those 10,000 years and what he does in the setting, but recent events in the galaxy have changed this a little bit. Not nearly as much as you often hear online, but a bit. The biggest thing is the emergence of the Great Rift. The spread of the rift at the end of the 41st millennium led to vast amounts of warp energy to be released into real space. This, of course, was a massive boon to the forces of chaos, allowing demons to manifest more easily and leading to chaos raids across the galaxy, as well as whole planets being swallowed up by the warp. But it also led to a thing called the Psychic Awakening. The influx of warp energy led to increased numbers of psychers across the galaxy and also made those who already existed more powerful.
So if you guys are a fan of Avatar, it's like when when you airbenders were reawakened. So it's the Great Awakening.
And that seems to have had an effect on the Emperor. In the wake of the rift, there were more reports of divine intervention by, apparently, the Emperor. Humble mortal worshippers of the god Emperor bore witness to manifestations of the Emperor angelic. Flocks of golden eagles and columns of scintillating flame that seared demonic and heretic flesh alike. These miracles galvanized those who bore witness to them, firming their resolve and filling their hearts with defiance even in the face of horrors unleashed against them. Gilliman credits his saving during Godblight as a sign that the Emperor is once again active in the galaxy. I fear the Emperor may be moving. I fear that he worked through me. I refuse to believe it at first, but the evidence that I have been presented with offers only one viable practical. The Emperor is active
Because how else do you see this other than heresy?
again. He's at work through the tarot, through visions, so-called saints, and acts of faith. And his personal preacher, Frater Matthew, also says the same, but as someone with a vested interest in that being true, he's not really the most trustworthy source. All these descriptions are, of course, deniable in some way, just like everything with the Emperor. It could be something else, but combined together, it does seem that the psychic awakening, the influx of warp energy into the galaxy, and the thinning of the veil between worlds has allowed the Emperor to intervene more often in support of his Imperium. This is what people are talking about when they talk about the Emperor awakening. It's not about him, getting up, yawning and stretching and wandering about. It's about him being more active in the galaxy as a psychic entity. But there's
That's a relief, because how else could he be reawakened other than making him walk around the table this like an Astartes the size of a knight or a titan?
Another new development, or newish development, that throws doubt on all that, and that's the reintroduction of the Star Child. Again,
there we go.
I'm sorry to do this so often in a video, but I have a whole video on the Star Child here. But essentially, this was a really old piece of lore that has recently been referenced in a few newer books, so suddenly we can assume it's still relevant. Remember that bit of himself the Emperor set adrift in the warp before his final battle with Horus? The part that Malcador said had all his hope, his mercy, his grace, his love cast into the lightless tracks of space and time, and that will, as cosmic ages turn, slowly grow by a coalescence of emotion and belief, just as the powers of chaos grow. That thing is the Star Child. And as well as that reference, it's also been obliquely referenced during the
He is, actually. For all intents and purposes, the body left on the throne is a zombie, ergo Carrion Lord.
Dawn of Fire series. The core of the Emperor's soul existing as a separate entity in the warp. In the old lore, the Star Child is a being of potential who secretly empowers and guides its champions. The corpse on the throne is worshipped by the Imperium, who believe
that corpse, for all intents and purposes, is a zombie. Carrion Lord.
Continues to live despite its broken body and continues to protect them. But in fact, the soul of the Emperor is the Star Child, and only by making those two parts whole will the Emperor be returned. Now, we know that
So, Star Child, Harry Potter.
some of that is still relevant, but we don't know how much of that is still relevant. We know that the Emperor set adrift all of his good bits, and at least one faction of Chaos were searching for it and considered that a threat, and that's all we know. But having the Star Child around does raise a load of questions. What if the Star Child is the thing that's receiving all that belief energy from humanity? What if it's the Star Child, not the skeleton on the throne, that protects? We don't know the answer to any of this, and I suspect neither do Games Workshop.
So it's still the Emperor. Emperor protects.
Little breadcrumbs that have been dropped. But it does call into question lots of what we thought we knew about the Emperor. Gives the story a new path to go down, if they want. In addition to all that, the Golden Throne has been failing. That's the plot of the Vaults of Terror series, which is set just during the spread of the Great Rift. In that series, a part of the Golden Throne, known as the Areopia Junction, the component that
because no one knows how to repair this, honestly,
allows the occupant of the throne to interface with the ancient machinery, is faulty and failing. The Fabricator General at the time suggests that it has somewhere between a couple of decades and a couple of centuries left. And that story was set about 20 or 30 years ago in universe, so it could fail at any time. If the throne fails, it's questionable how much of the stuff we've talked about above the Emperor could still do. Would the warp energy from the Psychic Awakening be enough to sustain him, or are we talking demons invade Terra? We don't know. And then finally, his eye moved! In the most recent trailer for 40K, the Emperor moves his eye at the end. A lot's been made of this, lots of clickbaity videos about this being proof that he's woken up now. But as I said in my own clickbaity video about it, the entire video is full of abstract metaphor and symbology, and I think the video is best taken that way. Pilgrims do not actually go to the throne room, psychers don't actually fall through the Emperor's hourglass like bullets, and while the Emperor in life could certainly change his appearance, he's never been shown as doing that since he got put on the chair. I would take all of this video as an allegory for the state of the Imperium, rather than proof that he can move his eyes, so he must be alive now.
That's the best interpretation that, everything here is just an allegory to the state of the Imperium.
As I'm sure you've noticed during this video, the answer to most questions about the Emperor is not that we don't know, we know a lot, it's more that we don't
What's next? I mean, it's up to GW's decision.
know how much is relevant or true. The Emperor, even back in the Heresy, was always less of a character and more of a plot device.
It's a
In the
concept.
current setting, the Emperor exists as a sort of looming threat, both the threat of the throne failing, but also the threat of him returning. He's the savior of mankind and everyone wants him to come back, but is he the same person that he used to be? Would that person being in charge be a good idea? If he were to actually wake, would that be, good for humanity or bad? Like everything in Warhammer, there's no straight answer to that. That's what the Emperor, as far as we can tell, does, and any sort of conclusion where it all makes sense and wraps itself up, well, that hasn't been written yet. And I doubt it will be.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Again, you guys!
And if you'd like to follow this series, well, like and subscribe and you'll probably get
heard the
notifications.
man.
And check below for details of the Patreon, the YouTube membership scheme, the merch store, and of course, the second channel. See ya!
Right, like it if you do and subscribe! Emperor knows we need it.